Okay, we should be live on Facebook right now. We're just going to verify that we're good and we're live and everything's working properly. So good morning, everyone. If you are joining us live on the Moundville Archaeological Park's Facebook page, we're going to get started here in a second. It does appear that we are live. Just waiting for my my internet connection to get me there. All right. All right, so it does appear that we are good to go. All right, I guess we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's Museums from Your Home live stream presented by the University of Alabama Museums. My name is Rebecca Johnson and I am the Communication Specialist for UA Museums. And joining me for a discussion about Moundville are Dr. Bill Bomar, Executive Director of the University of Alabama Museums, and Lindsey Gordon, Moundville Archaeological Park's Education Outreach Coordinator. And we hope to get Dr. Alex Benitez, who is the Director of Moundville Archaeological Park, in here at some point. But as far as right now, Dr. Bomar, Lindsey, good morning. How are you all?
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Moundville Monday.
That is true. Mondays are all Moundville Mondays. So before we begin in our discussion, while we are broadcasting, feel free to ask us any questions in the comments section. And you can ask us any questions about Moundville, about the park, about the museum, anything you have questions about, feel free to ask them. This is live, so anything can happen. We might have internet connections. We might have something go a little slow, but just hang in there with us. Facebook and all other websites are trying to do their best to meet the needs of online activity during this time. So now that we've gotten all kind of that business out of the way, Bill, where should we talk when we start talking about Moundville?
Well, first of all, before we talk about Moundville, I just want to tell our audience how happy we are to be able to bring the museums to you, the University of Alabama Museums, digitally and online. So I'm so proud of the staff of the University Museums who jumped right in. And 4 days after we closed our doors to the public, we were online live streaming every weekday. And so we mobilized very quickly, thanks to you, Rebecca, and your skills and knowledge and expertise was really useful at this time. But then also the full staff in helping us deliver content. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by everyone's creativity. Everybody has really gathered around this idea. So I'm enjoying seeing all the content everybody's putting out.
Yeah, and I want to tell our audience, so today we're talking about Moundville, but we do we feature a different area every day, and you can find on the museum's website more information about that. But our disciplinary breadth is large in the University Museum. So we have expertise to talk about history and archaeology, the natural sciences, and biology, geology. So we will have different topics every weekday for people to tune into.
Yeah, you can actually find all that information at museums.ua.edu/museums from your home. You can get the full schedule of all of our live streams and all of the links to every page that you can go to. So that makes it easy all on that one page.
But I see that Dr. Alex Benitez has joined us at Moundville, and so we can start talking about Moundville if y'all want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I am the Executive Director of the University of Alabama Museums, but I had the great fortune for 16 years to be the director at Moundville Archaeological Park. And during my time there, we completed a major renovation of the Jones Museum at Moundville. And so that's what we're really going to focus on today. But I know that some members of our audience might be somewhat new to the subject matter. So let's talk just real broadly about Moundville. And Rebecca, if you could show some images so people can see Moundville. Moundville is one of the most important archaeological sites in the United States. It's a National Historic Landmark. When it was at its peak almost 800 years ago, it was America's largest city north of Mexico. There were about 3,000 people living there. It was the capital of a great chiefdom that spread up and down the Black Warrior River Valley. And it developed a complex belief system and a very structured political system and beautiful art that we're going to get to see in the museum. And So this is the story that we tell in the museum that you're about to see, is the story of these great ancient people who built these mounds, who lived at the Moundville site 800 to 1,000 years ago. The site really peaked in the 1200s. You can see an artist rendering of what it might have looked like. Notice there's a palisade wall around the site. It was a fortified city with a 1 mile long wall around it, guard towers spaced all the way around. It would have been bustling with activity, and there would have been people arriving by canoe, people arriving by land. There would have been lots of trading going on. People coming in from hunting parties, cooking, making pottery, weaving baskets, building mounds. That was a huge one. It took about 100 years to build all of the mounds, and there would have been a lot of people who spent every day of their lives carrying baskets of dirt to build the mounds. So that's a general overview. We'll get into more detail inside the museum. But now we can see the outside of the museum. The museum was built in 1939. That was during the Great Depression, and to create jobs, the government, the federal government, created a lot of programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps. And Moundville was successful in getting a CCC camp located at Moundville, responsible for, there were about 400 young men there, and they were really responsible for developing the site as a park. So they built the roadways, they did an enormous amount of archaeology, and they built the museum that you can see there. And this museum renovation that we're going to talk about today of 10 years ago, one of the things we recognized is that the building itself is historically significant. So we really did not do anything to change the architectural front, the facade of the building. You can see there are elements of the architecture that reflect the Moundville culture. And so we really didn't change that, but we did want to affect the visitor experience right from the moment they get out of their cars. So we don't have it playing right now, but normally when you open your car door, you can immediately hear the sounds of a celebration, drum music, flute music, chanting, and then it draws you to the museum. And you walk along this area of these large heraldic posts along the sidewalk there as you approach the museum, all adding to that visitor experience.
So with those heraldic posts, because I think some people actually miss them and walk by them, can you tell us a little bit about how those that went into the instrumental portion of like the essence of the ambiance of the museum and how it set the tone for what was happening inside the museum?
Yeah, in fact, those wooden heraldic posts, they really set the tone for the visitor experience, but they also really represent the method that we use to develop the exhibits throughout the museum. And let me explain why. So we know the Moundville people were wood carvers, and if we were to not, yet we have no objects that they ever carved. They've all decomposed in the ground, wood rots away, and so we don't have any evidence in the form of wood carved art that we can display in the museum, but we know that they were wood carvers. And so if we were to leave that out of the story, we would be really leaving out an important element. So we recognize there are many parts of the story that are not represented in the archaeological record. And so how do we know those things if we don't know them through the archaeology? Well, we also have ethnographic, we call it, information, or historical accounts from the first Europeans who encountered the Native Americans of the Southeast and made a written record of what they saw. And so at many of these Mississippian Native American sites, the Spanish explorers Hernando de Soto and his men, they saw these wooden posts with carved animals on top of them. Now, Europeans never visited the Moundville site. So we don't have direct evidence of what kind of wood carvings there might have been at Moundville, but we do know that they carved wood because we find wood carving tools at Moundville, microliths, small flint knives that are really so small they could only be used for like delicate carving, like artistic carving. So we know they were wood carvers because of the tools, and we know of the kinds of things that were carved at other sites besides Moundville. So we have to present some hypotheticals or some best guesses of what they might have had at Moundville. So we took the idea of this heraldic post, and instead of copying what we see in the artwork from like Virginia and Florida, where you sometimes see deer on top of posts or an owl or a cat, instead of just copying those, we chose animals that were important to the Moundville people because they appear on their pottery. Like you can see right in front of you, the red-tailed hawk and the ivory-billed woodpecker. Does that answer your question, Lindsey?
Yes.
Okay.
My other question is, how long did it take for the I guess the reconstruction or like the new portions of the new facility to be built?
Yeah. Well, the planning took a lot more than the actual building of it. And the planning took a while because the fundraising took a while. So we all this was made possible through the generosity of some fantastic donors, and we should thank them. But it took about 5 to 6 years to raise the funds. And during that time, we planned every detail of the exhibits. And so that took about 5 years of planning. And then it took about 1.5 years to do the actual development of the exhibits being built at different places. And then the installation was about 6 months of installing the exhibits. Yeah, that was a happy day because it meant the project had started finally when we actually tore down the old cinder block 1960s gift shop that had been added onto the museum. Okay, so let's move on inside. And while Alex is moving inside, I will mention that we received early on in the planning phase a National Endowment for the Humanities grant that allowed us to bring together in the planning a great team of Native American representatives. That was very important to have their voice, the voice of the people who are descended from the Moundville people as part of the project. But then also museum educators, exhibit designers, and scholars, some of the best Moundville and Mississippian period archaeologists in the country come together to really work through these details. So here you can see a great view of the central exhibit hall in Moundville. And we had two main goals for our project, and that was to really bring to life the culture of the Moundville people in a way that people felt like they were there back in time and in space at the Moundville site. And then the other goal was to present the collection of Moundville artifacts as art, and you'll see a lot of that as we go through. But here you can see the central scene, and it really tells a story. And so I want to mention that and I'm sorry, there's a siren going by. I know y'all can hear that, and not going to try to hide it. Wait just a second. It's kind of like when I'm giving a tour at Moundville and the train goes by. And you have to tell everyone, hold on just a second. Oh, it's passing now. So a good exhibit tells a story, and now it's coming down the side road. It's a fire truck, actually. And he just turned off his siren because he saw what I was doing, I think. A good exhibit tells a story. And so our team, with our Native American representatives and our scholars, we started talking about what could be the basic storyline that we could cover all these themes. We identified themes we wanted to talk about, like religion, art, gender roles, politics, diplomacy. How could we connect all of those themes together through a story? And a story just kind of fell into our laps through some very recent archaeological research that was going on. Alex, could you show us those 3 pots in that case on the left? So many of the artifacts from Moundville are from other places. They're foreign in style. And these 3 pots appear to be foreign in style. They are foreign in style. And an archaeologist named Vin Stepanitis, who is a real Moundville expert at North Carolina Chapel Hill, he was doing some sourcing of Moundville artifacts where he did chemical tests, like we call it neutron activation, to analyze the components of the clay to find out where that clay came from for making those pots. So here we have these, what we thought were trade items. We thought these pieces had been traded to Moundville. And he did these tests on them and found out that was wrong. These pieces were made at Moundville with Black Warrior River clay. Well, then how do you explain it? These are completely foreign styles that did not evolve at Moundville. Well, the most logical explanation, the one that really has emerged, is that these vessels must have been made by people at Moundville who had come there from other places, who brought their artistic tradition with them. And so that really changed our full interpretation of Moundville. We now believe Moundville was more of a mixture of cultures, that there might have even been different languages spoken at Moundville. And so if you look at the procession, Alex, if you could show the broad view again, what we have here is a group arriving from another place, bringing their elements of their culture with them. And so all of the characters in this diorama, except for one, are really modeled to look like the people from the West, the people from the Mississippi River Valley, where we have a lot of artistic influence at Moundville. The one person in the scene that is dressed as the Birdman right there in the foreground, that's the only Moundville person in the scene. And he's the welcomer, the greeter. The Muskogee people would call this the Yatika. And the Yatika would be someone who spoke multiple languages, someone who would be the representative for the chief, because you all have to keep in mind, these chiefs of the Mississippian period were much more like what we think of as royalty, like kings, than the later Native American chiefs. And so there would have been very strict protocol. There would have been a way for groups to arrive and how they would be greeted. And so, the chief wouldn't have just walked out and immediately started greeting people from other places. There would have been a series of chants probably, and this person here is welcoming them. Now, the other important thing to note about this, if you can look up, Alex, is the sky scene. And this whole scene is made to make you feel like you are outside at Moundville. But there are these mythical creatures coming out of the clouds. And this was a great addition to the exhibit that we have to give credit to our Native American representatives who advised us on the planning team. They said, such an important event as this group arriving from the outside would have been accompanied by what you call supernatural creatures. And we settled on the Thunderers, these creatures from the Moundville belief system that appear in the art, that also appear in Southeastern Native American stories, that would have been upper world creatures that would have maintained order and purity and would have overseen an event like this. Now, I keep talking about this event, this group arriving from the outside. Alex, if you could zoom in on the female on the litter there, the palanquin. So the central storyline is this group is arriving from the West, bringing the daughter of their chief to be presented in marriage to the son, or the heir, actually, the heir of the Moundville chief. And so this is an important diplomatic and political event that would have been likely at these chiefdoms across the Southeast.
I have a logistical kind of question. So you have those mannequins that you're talking about too there. How were they made?
Okay, Alex, why don't you walk on up to the next scene and let's look at those. And and then Rebecca, as soon as we look at one now, we'll look at the pictures of how they were made. But here you can see a recreation of the chief's family. An important part of our project was the creation of these life-sized human figures. And yeah, we sometimes call them mannequins like Lindsey did, but these are far from like store mannequins. These are custom-made human figures. And the reason they look so realistic, and they really do, is that we chose 11 Native American models from across the Southeast and from Oklahoma to come to Moundville. And a company from New York that does this came to Moundville. There you can see the images in the maintenance shop at Moundville. And they poured molds over the faces of these characters, these models, to create our characters in our storyline. And it was very much like acting. There was some direction because we wanted certain facial expressions on the characters. So we had to describe the scene to them and have them get a certain look on their face. And then, to their credit, this is really incredible. They had to hold that look on their face for 5 minutes and breathe through straws that were stuck in their noses as these molds were poured on their faces. So I think, that part of the project turned out really great, and our models did a great job. So this recreated scene here shows a moment in time, the chief's family waiting for that big event to happen. You can see with the copper antlers on his head, that's the heir to the Moundville chief, and he is looking out, maybe trying to get a glimpse of his bride who's arriving. This daughter of another chief being brought in to be married to the heir of the Moundville chief. And you can see the chief is looking on, understanding the political importance of this because it's going to make his chiefdom much more powerful. The great thing about these recreated scenes is they allow us to present reproductions of a lot of the Moundville art. And by the way, I should mention, almost all of them were made by contemporary Native American artists. And that was a big part of the project. We dedicated a big part of the budget to having these artists produce these reproductions. And but the great thing about them is they allow you to see them in their context, like to see the reproductions of our artifacts, how they were worn, what they looked like when they were all bright and shiny and new. And you can see the chief there is holding a symbolic axe, a symbol of power that would have been very much like what a king would carry, like a scepter. And then you can go into the exhibits and take a look at the actual real artifacts, and you can see the copper celts. These were never used to chop anything. They don't have any signs of wear or use. These were symbolic of real weapons, real battle axes or stone axes, but they were for special use to be carried by a chief to show that he was the great powerful chief. Okay, we can move on over to really the most spectacular of all of the Moundville pieces, the Moundville Duck Bowl. We have 250 objects on exhibit at Moundville, and about 50 of those are on loan from the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian, including the Moundville Duck Bowl that you see here. And this is, many say, and I believe many art historians and archaeologists really say this is the most beautiful piece of prehistoric art ever found in what's now the United States. It's really spectacular. We have lots of fantastic pottery at Moundville made of clay, but I want you all to realize this is a stone sculpture, sculpted from stone using stone tools. And it has this elegant curved neck of a duck. It's really probably more of a mythical serpent bird creature, because you can see there are markings on its neck that are very much like snake markings. But this was found at Moundville very early on in 1905, when the site was first explored by a Philadelphian named Clarence B. Moore. And when he found this at Moundville, it created an international stir. People really didn't think that there were artifacts like this in the United States. And Harper's Magazine, the most popular magazine in the world, did a major feature story on the Moundville Duck Bowl. It said this was the archaeological find that had set the entire world agog. And it really had. So Moundville was very much a household name in 1905 and 06 when these discoveries were being made there. It's now sometimes a hidden jewel, and we want to get the word out more. And Rebecca's doing a great job, and Lindsey and Alex of doing that. But it was really people all over the country and the world were talking about Moundville when this piece was discovered. Let's take a look at the case in the back that shows ornamentation and regalia items. So you might have noticed our life-size human figures, which you can see photographs of them in that case there. Their regalia is really very beautiful, and it's based on real artifacts that have been found at Moundville. And I'll just show an example here on the far left. You can see the pieces in the back all lined up there, those dark pieces. Those are copper, and those are headdress ornaments that were found at Moundville. And you can see that our chief there has those copper headdress ornaments on his head ornament. So these pieces really allow us to show these pieces really allow us to show how the Moundville people dressed and ornamented themselves, and then we can show that to our visitors through our human figures. A beautiful cat pipe in the middle there, made of limestone. That's a smoking pipe. Tobacco would be put into the bowl in the top of it, and you would insert a wooden pipe stem into the rear of the cat. But those are, there's a series of those, and those were made in the Mississippi River Valley and traded to Moundville. All right, do we want to go on around and look at the stone discs?
Hey, Bill, can we mention real quick that the outside of the museum and the frieze is actually taken from this bowl design here?
Yeah, we call that piece that beaker or that cup, the ceremonial cup. It might have been used to serve a sacred drink like black drink made from the leaves of the Yopon holly. And the symbols on it show a long bone or bones and a skull. And we think that these are like war symbols. These would be trophies taken from the enemy, and so they do appear in the Moundville art. These war items, war symbolism.
We do have a couple of questions if
Okay,
you
now we
want
want
to
move
get
on
to
the
those.
discs.
Do you want to take any questions, or do you want to save questions till the end?
Okay, these are some of the most interesting artifacts from Moundville. These are stone pallets or discs. They've often been called pallets because we find elements of paint residue on them. And so we know they were used to prepare paint, but they were really used for far more than that, because we also find on them animal fat, plant material, all kinds of residues, and different colors or pigments. We think that these were more like altar stones used to prepare medicine for ritual application. And when I say medicine, you know, I'm talking about things that were used from natural elements to prepare for religious rituals. And so the one in the middle there, the rattlesnake disc, and and I should mention these are what we call diagnostic artifacts, in that they are somewhat unique to Moundville. When you find them at other sites, the first question that archaeologists often ask is, "Oh, is there a connection to Moundville? Because there are pallets here." These are very much a Moundville thing, but sometimes found at other sites. But the one in the middle there, it's so special, and it is the Alabama state artifact, the rattlesnake disc. It's so special because of this elaborate symbolism on it. And you see there are two snake-like creatures tied into knots, and they surround in the middle a hand with a symbol in the palm of the hand that kind of looks like an eye. Well, what we do when we try to interpret or explain the symbols of these ancient people is we look at the stories that have been passed down by Southeastern Native Americans and try to make some sense of them. And so we've looked at stories about snake creatures tied into knots, and it's really kind of inconclusive what that might mean. But the hand and eye symbol, the symbol in the middle, which by the way is Moundville's most common symbol, it would have been like the symbol of the Moundville people, like their logo. It appears on everyday cooking pots. It appears on beautiful elite art like this. But so it was very common, and everyone at that time would have known exactly what it meant. But we have to kind of really hypothesize what it meant. So we look at the stories passed down, and let me tell you one of those stories. And so there's a story about entering the afterlife that's told among the Cherokee, the Lakota, several groups across North America tell this story. And the versions of it are so similar that it really suggests that maybe this story was really very widespread. But anyway, the story says that when people die, their soul travels to the west, and it goes to the western edge of the Earth disk, the flat Earth, and the soul waits there. And night after night, more people die, and they gather there till there's a crowd waiting. And what they're waiting for is a particular time of the year when the great hand of the Creator appears in the night sky. And what they're talking about, it's been determined, is a constellation. They're referring to part of what most people today think of as Orion, the hunter. But what they saw looking at the belt of Orion down was the constellation of a hand. And so when that appeared in the sky, the story goes, all of the dead leaped off of this earth into the hand of the Creator, and they entered the path of souls, the river of light. And what they were referring to was the Milky Way. The stars across the center of the sky, those are the dead ancestors making their way to a final resting place. So we have this story told among Native Americans that talks about entering the afterlife through a hand. But still, why might that make this the Moundville symbol? Why might it be so? Why might that story have been told at Moundville? Well, Moundville, I told you, was this vast city, but I didn't tell you that when it was abandoned, the burials continued there by the hundreds, maybe even by the thousand. So people were continuing to bring their dead to Moundville after it was mostly abandoned. It became a necropolis, a city of the dead. So it really makes sense that a place so important for the burial of people might have had as its symbol a symbol having something to do with death and the afterlife. All of that is really theory, but it's educated theory. But that's what, to me, that's what makes Moundville so much fun. And so interesting. It's the mystery of it all. We don't know it all, and so we get to come up with these possible scenarios to explain what it might have been like there. So we can move on if you like.
I think they have some questions down in the comments, Rebecca.
Image, protect against the evil eye. In some cultures, definitely, but we would have no idea about that for the Moundville people. Again, like I just said, there's so many things we don't know about Moundville.
Are there any more?
Oh, a good question. Kendra Abbott asked, how did they cover the antlers in copper? The Moundville people became very skilled at copper work. And so those copper headdress ornaments I showed you were made from sheet copper that were, and you couldn't see, they actually were embossed with designs on them like the hand and eye. But anyway, the Southeastern Native Americans never developed metal smelting technology, but they would take copper that had been traded for from the Appalachian Mountains, maybe even from the Great Lakes region. And they would hammer it out into thin sheets, much like aluminum foil. Maybe not quite that thin, but they would hammer it out in these sheets, and then they would take wooden blocks and carve artistic designs into them, and then emboss. They would either rub or hammer the design into the copper sheets. The same method was used for covering the antlers. They would hammer it out into these sheets and then wrap the antlers. They even developed riveting. They had little rivets they used on a lot of the copper. Any other questions?
I think we can keep going.
Alex, I'll answer the next question as we start moving out into the main hall again. What happened to the Moundville people? You know, we can rule out a lot of things. We know from archaeology at Moundville, there's no evidence of any big traumatic event like an attack from an outside enemy. There's no evidence of stress like famine or drought or malnutrition on a large scale that would have caused them to leave. We do know that the site was abandoned in the 1400s, and it was abandoned piecemeal. Areas of the site picked up and left. And we believe the site, and if you go on a tour of Moundville, we talk about this on the outside part of the tour, but we believe Moundville was organized by clan or family kinship group. So different parts of the site were occupied by different clans. Well, it appears that it was abandoned by clan because radiocarbon dates show that particular areas of the site were abandoned before other areas of the site. So what does all that, to answer your question, we've ruled out a lot of traumatic event. What that really leaves is probably political reasons. Now there might have been stress, like there could have been a couple of years of bad crops that would not be enough to show up in the archaeological record, but it would be enough to cause people to be unhappy with the leadership. And so what we really think is that people just picked up and left and went to live in smaller villages up and down the Black Warrior River Valley and maybe even beyond. Okay, so in front of you, you can see these archway cases have lots of pottery in them. And we really wanted to show a big variety of the art from Moundville in these cases so that you can get a sense of Moundville style. You can see that Moundville pottery is usually blackened, which means during the firing process, something was done to reduce the oxygen to the fire to actually make it turn black. That's not because the clay color makes it that color. They made it that color intentionally. Sometimes, like in that piece you see there, it's burnished, so it has that gloss to it. It's been highly polished, and there's a variety of form. But once you start to look at it, That's a great example right there of a very typical Moundville pot. And it has a design on it that's often called a windmill design because it looks like a windmill, but the Moundville people did not have windmills. But it is a globular shaped bottle that's a very popular Moundville style.
Can you talk a little bit too about the walls, like the scenic sides, the scenic walls of the museum?
The murals, yeah.
The murals, I'm sorry.
The Palisade wall at first. Okay,
Sorry.
yeah, so we wanted to create, this kind of exhibit is called an immersive exhibit. And immersive exhibits have been around for a long time. I tell my museum studies students, in the 1970s and 60s even, like the Field Museum at Chicago, they were creating Egyptian galleries that made you feel like you were going down into a tomb. And so we really felt the best way to connect to our audiences about what it was like at Ancient Moundville was to create an immersive experience. So we create this scene with the life-size human figures and with these murals painted on the walls that puts the visitor out on the plaza, out in the middle of the mounds, and you can see people gathered around bringing gifts for this group of outsiders. You can even see up ahead, we're not there yet, but there's even painted into the mural people who are dressed a little differently, who have different tattoos, who are part of the group coming from the West. So all of that, a lot of careful thought went into that. One thing I'd also like to mention, you might wonder, how do we know how the Moundville people dressed and how did they tattoo themselves? And what about the body paint and stuff? Because, that kind of thing doesn't survive in the archaeological record. The answer is we don't know exactly. We do know that the Mississippian people did adorn their bodies with tattoos and body paint from the accounts of Europeans who visited other sites. But how exactly did the Moundville people look? And so we don't know exactly, but the best guess, we took artistic designs from their artwork, from their pottery, and applied it to their bodies. So that's just a guess of the kind of designs maybe that they might have had on their bodies, but that's what we did. Now, I'll point out the scene you're looking at now, though, those people are from the West, from the Mississippi River Valley. So we took designs off of the pottery from their area and put on their bodies. And then the Moundville people in the scenes have Moundville designs. Okay, let's move on around. And do we have any more questions, Rebecca? Have any musical instruments been found at Moundville? I'm trying to think. There is archaeological evidence for conch shell trumpets at some other sites, but we haven't found them at Moundville. The most common southeastern Native American musical instrument would have been the river cane flute, which has not survived at Moundville. There have been flutes found, though, at other sites, especially there have been some found in real dry environments, like in caves, I believe, but none have been found at Moundville. The kind of soil that we have just is not conducive to wood preservation. Alex or Lindsey, can you think of any, are there any evidence of any musical instruments that have been found at Moundville?
I can't think of any.
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay, the 6 pots that we see in that case are all effigy vessels. An effigy is something that's made in the likeness of another living thing, an animal or a person. And so these effigies are all animal effigies, but you can see on the far right there is my favorite one. That's a beaver. See, it holds a wooden stick in his hand, has the flat tail in the back. And then to the left of that is a bat. And there's also a duck, there's a fish in there. And the Southeastern Native Americans really paid special attention in their artwork to animals that did not fit into neat taxonomic or biological categories. Scientists today use taxonomy with Latin names for genus and species and things like that. The Native Americans also had a taxonomic system, and we know this from the accounts of the Europeans, but they would describe animals based on their habitat sometimes and their behaviors. And so they would classify animals according to things like bird or animals of the air, animals that could walk on ground, animals that could dig in the ground, animals that could go underwater, animals that could go on top of the water. So the animals that fit into the animals that did not fit into neat categories that could transcend those levels always appear more often in the artwork. Like, for example, a beaver or a bat, which are just, unusual creatures as far as, a bat can go on top of the water, on the land, it can go under the water, and it eats wood or chews on wood. So those drew special attention. Okay, Alex, you can move on to the next area, and you can see it's somewhat dramatic, leaving this area, which is a daytime scene. The sign says "Portal to the Starry Path." There's a special effect of a winged serpent that just appeared. And as you move into this area, this really explores the outer world of Moundville, the spiritual outer world and the physical outer world, which would be connected. It's a more mystical kind of mood. It's a nighttime scene. And this really reflects that era when Moundville became a necropolis, a city of the dead, when the religious activities were so important at Moundville to ensure crossing over into the afterlife. And Alex, if you could show that case, the first one right in front of you, you can see some objects found at Moundville from other places. We really believe that there was a lot of religious activity associated with special knowledge gained from other places. And sometimes we think that maybe the shaman would be the one who had ventured to other places, who brought back with them special magic or had brought back with them secret knowledge from other places that could be told in the form of stories, that could be applied to rituals and that kind of thing. And so here we see some incredible pieces at Moundville that probably had religious connections but were from other places. And then in this room, we also explore the religious life of the Moundville people through some of the symbols. And so why don't you go over there and show us some of the winged serpents, Alex? So I told you the hand and eye was the most common Moundville symbol. The second most common Moundville symbol is the winged serpent. And it is this snake-like creature. It is a serpent with wings coming out of its back. And it's really a mixture of animals. You have wings, you have a snake, but you also have horns sometimes or feathered plumage coming out of the head of them. And these would have been, according to the stories, very feared creatures. The Cherokee called the winged serpent the Uktana, and the Uktana was the most feared creature of the Cherokee belief system. There you can see that one very much has deer antlers. Actually, the earlier ones have the deer antlers, and over time they evolved to just be like little appendages or little antenna over time. So these would have been very important upper world creatures in the belief system of the Moundville people. We think we might actually do one of these live streams specifically on the symbolism. We call it the iconography, coming up soon. And so in that, you'll be able to hear a lot more about how the stories of the Southeastern Indians connect to these symbols and how we interpret their meaning. Okay, so Alex, why don't you zoom out? Let's tell people about the multimedia show that we show in here. It's actually not running right now. We're having, well, the museum's closed now because of COVID-19, but even when it's been open, we've had some technical issues, but we're using that as an opportunity it's been 10 years since the museum was redone, and it's really time to freshen it up a little bit. And one way we can do that is with multimedia and with technology. So in this recreated Earth Lodge, which was a kind of structure that existed at Moundville, this is a set for a multimedia show that really immerses the visitor in the religious life of Moundville. So the previous show, a shaman appeared and he would tell stories. It was about a 9-minute show. Yeah, there it is. He would tell stories about the Moundville belief system, such as the portal to the path of souls that I mentioned. And when he would talk about objects in that room, he would point to those cases, and those cases would light up even brighter. So it was important for the visitor to connect the objects with the stories that way. So we're going to do something similar as far as connecting to the objects, but really an entirely new production. And Alex and his staff are already working on that, working on some ideas for a script. And that's going to be our next fundraising priority for Moundville is the new Multimedia Show. All right, so are there any questions while we start to move over into the new addition into the building? How widespread was cranial modification? Charles Turnipseed asks. It was actually pretty common among the Southeastern Native Americans. There is a lot of evidence for that that has been looked at in the human remains from Southeastern sites such as Moundville. And the goal was actually to create a different type of skull shape by actually when children were small, applying a device to the head that would shape the head, much like we use braces over time to shape our teeth or orthodontics. The same thing would happen to the bones in your body if you wore something like that. Lindsey or Alex, do y'all have any comments on that?
I think you said it perfectly. Yeah, they would just wrap it. At least most of the time, it's equivalent to like 2 boards, and then they would wrap it to make their skulls either elongated or whatever look, or not look, but whatever they were going for.
Yeah, and we should point out that's done in other cultures around the
It
world
is.
as well. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Alex.
That's what I would add.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's what I was going to say. It's just that it's amazing how widespread cranial modification was, but also the evidence for it in cradle boards. We do find that not only in North America, but also Central South America quite a bit.
Right. And the more wide known example is in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to the back of the museum as we answer more questions. Are archaeological excavations still taking place at Moundville? Yes, they are. So archaeology goes on at Moundville, in particular in the falls when the University of Alabama Department of Anthropology conducts an annual field school. And this coming fall, the field school is going to be excavating over along the riverbank at really a very rich part of the site where we're preparing for some erosion control measures to be taken on the riverbank. So that's coming up. But actually, in advance of that, we have something exciting. Should COVID-19 be cleared up in time, this summer we have a program called the Museum Expedition that the Alabama Museum of Natural History puts on, and it's at a different archaeological or paleontological site every year. This year it's going to be at Moundville. That's an incredible opportunity for the public, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and adults to come live in a camp at Moundville and excavate at one of the nation's most important archaeological sites. So there, you can find information about that on the Alabama Museum of Natural History webpage. Okay, so everything that you've seen so far inside the museum, it was actually in the original 1939 building. But the project 10 years ago expanded the building into this area with new construction. We have a beautiful retail store called Knotted Birds Gifts. I'm actually holding something I bought from there, my Moundville thermal mug, which you can get when we open back up. But we actually have some great things to take home from Moundville to remember your experience, like T-shirts and hats. But I want to mention we also have a lot of handmade objects made by Native Americans. And so our staff, Janet Wyatt, the manager there, actually visits with Native Americans and sometimes, buys baskets from them just sitting in their living room or on the hood of a car. And these are some beautiful things that you really just can't get anywhere else in Alabama. So the retail space is a beautiful space. It also is themed. We have these large wooden poles and things. But if you look out through the glass, you can see the Moundville site. And so I think that's an important thing, to actually be able to look out at the site while you are shopping for items. Really cool. And then we also have a coffee shop, the Black Warrior Coffee Company, with some of the best coffee you can get anywhere, but also refreshments and snacks. The idea is that we want people to have a chance to take a break and reflect on what they just saw. So almost this is part of the educational experience, because you can have some refreshments, some soft drinks, snacks, coffee, sit there at the glass and look out at the site with new eyes. After you've seen the exhibits that really show what Moundville might have looked like 800 years ago, come take a break and sit down and look at it with new eyes. Look out at the site and imagine what it might have been like now that you've had this museum experience. And if you want to take that experience even further, there are mounds that you can climb at Moundville. Alex, if you want to go on outside. We have this beautiful viewing area out here with a great view of the mounds. Mound P right there behind the museum has this staircase that you can go to the top of and look out at the site. Visitors often enjoy looking out at the water and looking at the turtles or feeding the turtles. We have lots of snapping turtles and occasionally seeing a water snake or something like that. And there are also fish in the lake. I'll just mention now that we're outside that, you know, Moundville is a great visitor experience. It's educational. It's also recreational. A lot of the site, most of the site's experience, most of your time there would be experienced outdoors and then enhanced by the indoor museum experience. So you can climb mounds. There's a cell phone audio tour you can use as you go through the site. There also is there are interpretive signs throughout the site that explain what you're seeing as you go through. You can choose to walk the site or drive a good bit of it around. And I will mention that the whole park's been closed because of COVID-19, but keep watching our Facebook page. Alex is going to be making an announcement soon. We're making preparations to open the grounds of the park because it has been determined by our governor that outdoor recreational experiences are an important, essential activity. So we're going to, of course, ask that visitors maintain social distancing. We're going to also ask that no groups of 10 or more even come into the site. But we are going to open up the grounds of the park. Our buildings won't be open yet, but in the next couple of days, people will be able to come in and walk and jog and bicycle and get back to enjoying the outdoors, which is important for their physical and mental health as well during this time. Okay, so that's pretty much the tour that I have, but there are lots of other things I could talk about. I want to give Alex and Lindsey a chance to chime in with anything they might feel that I've skipped, and also our viewers if they have any more questions to pose them.
Bill, I would just mention that
Alex, your audio froze up.
I might have to go back inside the museum.
Yeah, so just to let our viewers know, we do have Wi-Fi at the Moundville Museum.
Yes.
And so when you're having your cup of coffee there, you can use the Wi-Fi, but that's why Alex is getting a better signal inside the building.
Yes, and it is free, and you just need to stay inside the building. That's really what we were trying to show.
Okay.
I was just going to add that we do have the audio tour has been converted to a web app, and that's live, and we're updating that still. There should be a new version going up today or tomorrow, but that's another way to experience the site and get some of the information that's on our interpretive panels as well.
Yeah, and you don't have to be at Moundville to access that, even by cell phone number or the web app, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's through OnSell at Moundville, or OnSell Moundville will get you to that, but it should be linked to our website.
Yeah, if we don't have a link on our website to that, let's get one up soon. Rebecca,
yeah, we will.
That. Okay, great. Okay, Catherine Edge asked, how much did the renovation cost? It was a $5 million project, $5 million and some change. And so I'll mention that about $1.5 million of that was federal grant funds that we received. But the vast majority of the $5 million, over $3.5 million, was from the generosity of private donors. Do any of the historical tribes incorporate symbolism found at Moundville? Charles Turnipseed asked. That is an excellent question. And yes, they do. It's so exciting for us to see historic examples and contemporary examples of symbols that we see at Moundville still being used today. And so things like the knotted bird, like two birds tied into knots with beads coming out of its mouth, those are used historically among the Muskogee. and the Chickasaw and Choctaw tribes. We see, I mentioned earlier, the winged serpent among the Cherokee people. We're often asked, what tribe were the Moundville people? And so I think with this question is a good time to answer that question. The Moundville people existed really before what we would recognize as the historic tribes were organized, but they were certainly the ancestors of these tribes. So these were the ancestors of probably more than one southeastern tribe. And you can find, as far as in the artwork, like you asked, Charles, you can find examples among the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Muskogee people. You can find examples of connections to ancient Moundville. So the correct answer may be that there are multiple tribes descended from the Moundville people.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any last thoughts you want to share with the viewers about Moundville?
I would just stress how significant Moundville is and how you shouldn't take it for granted just because it's in your own backyard or maybe it's in your own home state. Moundville has visitors from all over the world. Dr. Benitez and his staff, they put up in the lobby of the administration building a map where visitors can put a pin where they're from. And in just a year, that map was filled with pins from all over the world. And yet we still talk to people who live near Moundville, who live near Tuscaloosa or within a couple hours drive, who say, I haven't been there since the 4th grade. And so we really want to stress to people, come see it, give it another try. You're going to love it. It's a fantastic visitor experience to come to Moundville. Now, of course, if you want to see our museum, you're going to have to wait till we reopen. But once that happens, I hope you'll take advantage of the opportunity, like so many people from around the world do, and come see Moundville.
Yeah, Moundville is such a beautiful...
Lindsey and Alex, anything you want to add in particular, maybe about programs at Moundville? Like, I'm certain, I'm very confident that by October we're going to be rid of this Corona stuff, right? So
yes, I hope so.
So, Lindsey, you want to talk about the festival in October?
So I'm super excited. The Native American Festival happens every October, and it's going to be this year from October 7th through the 10th, I believe. So it's 3 days. So if you're a teacher, we'll be starting to take reservations and stuff for it soon. And if you're not, you can still come visit us. All of our tribal people come home. We have people on the stage. There are different artisans that come from all over the state to demonstrate their crafts and just tell stories. So we're really excited for you all to come out to the park during that time period and just visit the grounds with us and enjoy.
Great.
Okay, so we have about 3 minutes left. I would just like to remind everybody that if you want a full live stream schedule and links to our Collections coloring book and Discovering Alabama's online educational resources and an archive of all of our live streams that we've been doing here on Facebook, you can go to museums.ua.edu/museums from your home, and I'll pull that link up there. So if you happen to miss any of our live streams, you can go back and look at those. But I think that's going to do it for this Museums from Your Home live stream that we had out at Moundville for Moundville Monday. We'll be doing this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. And each day will feature a different aspect of UA museums. And tomorrow we're going to be visiting with the Gorgas House Museum and the Mildred Westervelt Warner Transportation Museum. We're going to be talking about some history there. So come back to those Facebook pages tomorrow and join us for that. And from everybody at UA Museums, we would like to thank you for joining us and visiting UA Museums from your home. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Great, thank you.
Bye.